The first thing that happened out of that door knocking was that we had a neighborhood watch meeting, and 40 people showed up. And that blew me away. That blew the police department away. And they immediately knew that there was a problem that we needed to take care of.
Welcome to the SGV Master Key, a show where you will hear personal stories of triumph over failures and how others successfully navigated the unique landscape that is the San Gabriel Valley. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we have chosen the San Gabriel Valley for our home or businesses or both. We believe it is the people and small businesses that make this community great, and we love to share their stories with you. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at sgvmasterkey.com. Here are the hosts for the show, Russell Mono and Scott Warmoth.
All right, welcome to another episode of the SGV Master Key. Thanks for joining us again. Scott, big part of what we do and spend time together is often going hiking, and we're blessed to have so many different trails right in our backyard, right?
We spend a lot of time hiking, and we do it together. We do it on our own. When my kids come back from New York, Wisconsin, places they live, one of the first things they always want to do is go to the foothills, go to the trails. We have some favorite places that we've been climbing for years. Every Christmas Day we will, go take a hike. We're really lucky in Pasadena to be so close to the foothills and have so many trails and so many just beautiful places to climb and
right.
Just look over the city,
Right, and hiking, we've had some guests talk about hiking, and hiking means different things to different people. And the one thing that it is for sure is something memorable and special for them because they take time out of their lives to do it, right? And our guest today has a very special story about hiking, and her connection to the SGV is through Pasadena. But welcome, Susana Porras, to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So your connection to the San Gabriel Valley is you work here in Pasadena, right?
Yes, I do. I work for Council Member John Kennedy. He is one of the council members here in the city of Pasadena for District 3, and I am his district liaison.
And other than you're working here, do you have any other connections to the San Gabriel Valley? Did you grow up here?
Oh, I grew up here. My parents are originally from Guatemala, and they came here in the early 70s. And one thing that I always think about is how lucky I was that my parents actually ended up here in Pasadena. I thought that was very lucky. The reason that my parents came here in the first place was that at the time there was a civil war happening in Guatemala, and things were pretty bad. And at the time, my father was starting to see people that he knew that were getting killed, and he saw their pictures or their names in the newspaper. And coincidentally, a distant cousin of his who happened to live here in the States said, "Hey, how would you like to come to the United States?" And I don't think that my dad thought twice about it. And he said, "Yeah, let's go." And so my mom and him made the trek down to Pasadena, and I was born shortly thereafter.
So you were born here, you grew up here?
I grew up here. I went to all the public schools. I went to Allendale Elementary School, that's no longer here. And I went to Washington Middle School. And I also went to Blair High School here in the near South Pasadena. And so go Vikings.
Wow. So you are a real native.
Yes, I am.
So did your parents share stories? Obviously they did from when they left Guatemala. When did they share that with you? When did you learn of that?
Actually they were very reserved about it. I didn't learn about that until maybe a couple of years ago, and my dad only spoke about it very briefly. So I was very surprised. I was very taken back because, you don't hear about those. Usually when you hear about immigrants coming to the United States, it's because, of economic hardship. Back in the 70s, there were a lot of people coming here for political reasons, but that's not something that you hear about today as much. And so I was very taken back that my parents came here out of fear of, losing their lives, for political reasons as opposed to, just, for economic stability.
Do you have family in Guatemala?
All my family is in Guatemala. Everybody is still there.
Have you had an opportunity to go?
I used to go every summer, starting when I was about 11. I would spend a month in Guatemala, and I went a total of about 8 times. So I had an opportunity to see the entire country. It's a beautiful country, actually. It's very diverse in its geographic regions. It has volcanoes and mountains and beaches and lakes. It has a very beautiful colonial town. Anything you can possibly wish for in a vacation is in Guatemala, and you don't have to trek very far.
So you spent a lot of time in Guatemala, and you were able to contrast, Pasadena and growing up here with the lives of your relatives in Guatemala. And, what kind of observations did you have? You felt your life growing up here was a great life.
Yes, it was. I think my parents were both working class people, but they did absolutely everything that they possibly could to make my life comfortable. And luckily, my family in Guatemala was able to become successful too. I have a lot of cousins, and that became teachers, doctors, lawyers, and that sort of thing. So they live a fairly comfortable life as well. But yeah, there were definitely some differences. I don't have a horse in my backyard, and I don't get to pick up the eggs, for breakfast. But I think they live a very healthy lifestyle in that sense. It's very organic.
Right.
Yeah.
Simple, more simple.
Yes,
right?
more simple. Definitely, I agree. Yes.
Yeah.
A lot more walking on a daily basis. Definitely. Yeah.
We've had a lot of guests here, or several guests, speaking about their experiences growing up as a immigrant or a non-native. But you're the first. How would you prefer that I refer to your heritage? Latina?
Oh, that's fine. Yes.
Okay. So you're the first Latina. What was that like? Because I don't know that there's a large Guatemalan population in Pasadena.
Oh, you know what? There actually is.
Wow. Okay.
There's a very large one, and it's in a very compact area of Pasadena. It's in District 5, and it's right on pretty much on that area of Los Robles and Orange Grove. And a lot of them are indigenous people that are coming from San Marcos, on the border towns of Guatemala. And so you see a lot of them, and I spoke with one this morning, and you can hear their accent because they're actually not fluent in Spanish. They speak their own dialect. There's actually more than 12 recognized dialects in Guatemala, and that's their first language, and they learn Spanish later. And so there's a big healthy population in that area. Yeah.
Do you speak that as well?
I wish I did. I really wish I did. I've thought about it, but the problem is that which one do you learn? You're not. There's just so many, and there's 12 recognized ones. There's a lot of them that are not recognized. So you would have to learn quite a few, I think, to be able to communicate with the majority of the population.
So can you recognize someone who's from Guatemala just by their Spanish?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Definitely. It's a little bit more, in Spanish, they say that's a little bit more sung. It has a little bit of a little twang to it in Spanish. Yeah.
So I think in the Southern California area there, the majority of Latinos and Latinas are from Mexico, right? Mm-hmm. But there is obviously a large population from other South American countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and whatnot. So I am interested in what it was like growing up in Pasadena for you.
Oh, sure. I think out of that fear that my father had for safety, I think that my dad really looked for a place for me to grow up that was safe. And he found a rental in southwest Pasadena, actually not very far from here, that belonged to the owners of the people that he worked for. And so I was able to grow up there, but my dad really placed a lot of emphasis on me growing up American. And I grew up in a very American neighborhood. I didn't really have the Latino experience until I got a little bit older, actually. But my parents did place an emphasis on me learning Spanish. So Spanish was my first language, and I eventually learned English. So I didn't lose that, and I obviously didn't lose my heritage because I was able to go to Guatemala every summer. But I was lucky that I grew up in a very nice area, but to a certain extent, I kind of grew up in a bubble. And I was very protected from a lot of things. And whenever I would hear about gangs and drugs and violence, it almost seemed like a myth to me. It didn't seem real. I would think, who does things like that, right? And it wasn't until later when I turned 23, I graduated from college and I got my first job. I started working in an alternative education school here in Pasadena. And my students were fresh out of juvie. I had the pregnant teens. And, they were kids that were in a lot of trouble. And that's kind of gave me a fresh dose of what, life was in another side of Pasadena. And then
that was the first time you were seeing it.
Oh, that was my first time seeing it. Yes. So, I'm coming from, Southwest Pasadena to Northwest Pasadena. And I couldn't believe the stark difference. It was just incredible.
Was Blair, at the time you went to it, was it, pretty diverse?
It was kind of diverse, but again, I was in my own little bubble because I was in this thing called the Health Academy, and the Health Academy was in a little corner of the school, and we associated with the same kids every single day. Mm-hmm. And it was a program that took us on field trips, and we worked with the local hospitals, and we got training from various groups around town. So again, it was still another little bubble. It wasn't like I was exposed to the other kids on campus very much. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where did you go to college?
I went to Cal State LA, just up the street. I'm an only child, a girl. So going away to college was kind of out of the question.
Did you actually leave home?
No, I
stayed
at home.
Okay.
I was a 110% commuter student.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
You got a job following your graduation.
Yes,
here in
almost
Pasadena.
Immediately. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I came back home to work.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you're working for the city now for a councilman. Mm-hmm. When did you make? What's your work history? How did you make the transition to what your first job was to working for the city? Or did you work for the city from the beginning? No.
I worked as a teacher for many, many years. And ironically, that year, my first year teaching, I ended up buying my first house. I always wanted to have a house. So I bought my first house in Northwest Pasadena. And 3 of my own students lived on the street where I bought the house.
Oh, wow.
And like I said, it was a night and day. And I moved into a street that had a lot of crime. It had gangs, it had prostitution, it had a lot of violence, and at night I could hear the bullets whizzing by. There was one time when the police were chasing somebody, and the gentleman dropped the gun in the front yard. There wasn't a boring day, and I think at the time, I was still in college because I was still going for my master's degree. So I was really busy, and I thought, it'll get better. It'll get better. And things just got progressively worse. And I think I finally hit my, my own limit when I saw that one of the houses on my street sold, and a brand new family moved into the street, and the young lady was pregnant and had a toddler. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is a disaster waiting to happen. And so I made a flyer and I started knocking on doors, all 59 doors in the neighborhood. And I quickly found out that everybody else was just as distressed as I was. And that was kind of the beginning of what the process was in me learning everything that I needed to learn for this job that I have right now.
What was on your flyer? What did you go just to find out the status of how they were feeling?
You know what? I didn't want to because I wasn't sure how people felt. So, and I didn't want to, and I wasn't sure how many people were associated with the gang members. So I didn't want to anger anybody. So I put things on the flyer like, oh, do you want improved lighting? Do you want to improve the traffic on the street? Just little things like that. And so I was knocking on doors telling people this, and they're like, oh yeah. And also, could we take care of the gang members down the street too? And it seemed like every single door I knocked on, I got their same response. Yeah.
Wow. And you just did this just to find out for yourself?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Because I collaborated with the police department, with the Pasadena Police Department, and they walked me through all these steps. And back then there was an office called Neighborhood Connections in the city of Pasadena. And through them and a collaboration with the police department, they walked me through all these steps. And some of the things that they would ask me to do, it didn't seem like they were going to work, but they did. But the first thing that happened out of that door knocking was that we had a neighborhood watch meeting, and 40 people showed up. And that blew me away. That blew the police department away. And they immediately knew that there was a problem that we needed to take care of. And it was a problem that had sort of exacerbated over a very long period of time. So it wasn't going to go away overnight. It actually took years. It took about 8 years to finally live in a street where now if you go down the street, you wouldn't even believe me of what I'm telling you, because you couldn't even tell. You see kids playing outside. You see our senior neighbors outside having their coffee, chit-chatting. You would never think that anything like that ever happened on that street.
So how big of a geographical area was it? You mentioned 59 houses.
It's very small. It's 59.
It's a couple of streets,
it's
right?
It's basically one street.
One street.
Mm-hmm.
So a neighborhood watch can be just a one street location.
Definitely.
Or yes. Is that how it most commonly is? I'm not sure.
I think it's most common that way because you have to be able to see what's happening in your neighbor's home.
Okay.
So if I would see something suspicious in a neighbor's house, like maybe somebody picking up a package or something, then I would call the neighbor right away, and the neighbor would be like, oh, it's okay, it's my friend's picking it up for me, or something like that.
Can you actually describe what neighborhood watch is? Because obviously I see signs. I know that there is such a thing, but I've never been part of neighborhood watch. I don't know exactly how it works.
Oh, sure. You have a person who's a neighborhood watch captain or contact, we call them, like myself. I've been the neighborhood watch contact for my street since 2006. And what I do is I collect the names and telephone numbers and addresses of everybody who wants to participate. In my case, it's most of the homes who want to participate. If you decide not to participate and you do not want to give your information, then you do not receive the list. So, of course, most people want to receive the list. And so I coordinate this list every couple of years. We have to update it. And then we pass it along. If we do see something suspicious, let's say somebody's hanging around that shouldn't be there, I'll call the police department. And then I'll call a neighbor so that they call the police department, and they call. You
will call. You mean as the captain, or did you describe yourself as captain?
Contact, the neighborhood watch contact. Yes.
Watch contact. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes. Typically, if I see it, yes, whoever the first person is to see it will call it in. Sometimes what the neighbors will do is if they're too scared or their English isn't, they're not too comfortable speaking English, then they'll call me, and then I'll call. But typically what happens is that there's a better police response if more than one person calls.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just in general or because of the neighborhood?
And that's just in general. Unless it's a real emergency. Obviously, if there's a real emergency where you need a police officer, they'll show up. Mm-hmm. But if it's something that you want investigated, that you're just not sure, some suspicious activity, then you might as well have at least a couple people.
Do you identify yourself as a neighborhood watch participant when you call the police, or
no? I do not.
That doesn't mean anything.
No, I do not. No. Every now and then, if it's something that I feel is urgent, I'll let them know who I am as an employee.
Okay.
But I even rarely do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, for the listener, if you don't know Pasadena, it's quite a large city. And if someone just says, "Oh, I'm from Pasadena," and they're not from here, okay. But if you're from here, we know that there's very different areas to the city, right? East Pasadena, North Pasadena, just south of the freeway and just north of the freeway. And the place that you're describing, my understanding, it has been in the past quite a dangerous place to live, right? Northwest Pasadena.
It's had some challenges. Yes, it definitely has. I think I have to do a little bit of research on this, so don't quote me on this, but I think that the moment when the police department and the city finally decided to get involved was during the Halloween Massacre that I believe happened in 1994.
Halloween Massacre.
I do remember that because I had just moved to Pasadena in 1993. And yes, what was the... I remember this. It was a horrible event.
It was a very horrible event.
Yeah.
Kids were out trick-or-treating and 3 kids were shot and killed.
Yeah.
And one of the kids that was murdered was actually my classmate from my ceramics class. That's why I remember it kind of vividly. It was a pretty awful event. And so the police intervened and a lot of the crime, reduced. But the thing is, in areas where there are a few more challenges than you might think, it's very important for the community to get involved. As a resident of your area, it's very important that you get out and you're proactive. And if you want some changes in your community, you need to go out and do them. Yeah.
Well, you're quite courageous, I would say, to do that initial and even to continue to go out and knock door to door. That's I think I would be scared. I would be scared to do that if I don't know people. There was definitely a lot of fear, let me tell you, because you just don't know whose door you're knocking on. You have no idea. Right.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of fear, but there were lives at stake at that point. And so, yeah.
So we got onto this topic because Scott was asking, how did you transition into your current job? So am I correct in thinking this sort of spurred a desire to be more involved in community?
Yes. I think I became very passionate about it because I wanted people in office to care about the people in the community. I feel that if there's a strong city with staff and strong politicians, and if the residents are interested, I think it's definitely a good group to help any issues that are going on in the city. But if you have a politician that doesn't care, then you have definitely a big void there. And so I became very interested in politics. And when the elections came up, I got very involved because I wanted to make sure that there was somebody in office in our district that cared about the people who lived there.
So you weren't working as a crime watcher as a job, but
no.
How did you come to be at your current job?
Well, I ended up working because I got involved in politics, and I ended up getting offered a temp job at the Jackie Robinson Community Center, probably around 2014. And I took the job because I was working for Neighborhood Connections, and I really believed in the office because they helped us clean up our area. And so I took it as an opportunity, and I started working there.
Can you describe for the listener what the Jackie Robinson Community Center is?
Oh, sure. Jackie Robinson Community Center is actually up at 1020 North Fair Oaks, and it's a place where the community comes in, and there's all kinds of events that happen. There are all kinds of resources. We have the Consumer Action Center if you need assistance completing forms, if you need help with housing, if you need help with any type of mental care, anything like that. They have if they don't have the resource there, there's somebody there who can advise you on where you can best get it. Yeah. Oh, so I worked there, and then the opening became available in Councilmember Kennedy's office. And after so many years of working as a volunteer, in essence, and then only a couple of years working for the city as a temp, at Jackie Robinson, the opportunity came to apply for this position. And by then, I knew very well how the city worked, and I knew a lot of the staff. And my job, it's very important to know who does what in the city, more than anything else, because you have to be able to just call somebody up and say, hey, I need this to get this done. So it was a process to get the job. My boss gave me a very lengthy interview, and after 3 separate interviews and 3 hours of interviews later, he finally offered me the job.
Do you feel you're able to affect what your initial desire was in making him care about the community?
Oh, I think he already does that. I think he was already very passionate about the community. And I think I compliment him very well in that sense.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we ask each guest if they can bring an item of significance with them to the show. What did you bring today?
I brought a watch, not because the actual watch has some significance, but for me, it's time. I think time has always been very precious to me, and I've always taken my time to be very valuable. And I do everything I can to take advantage of all my opportunities. I think that's very important.
Wow.
So you don't want to waste time.
Exactly.
Which is an efficiency thing. But there's another thing about time too, and it's like time you spend with people and time you do things that are important for yourself or for others, or get experience, life generally.
I agree. Definitely the time that you spend with your loved ones, definitely the time that you spend for yourself. I think, a lot of people always forget about themselves.
Right.
I think my pet peeve is when people tell me, hey, did you watch such and such on television? And I'm like, when did you have time to watch television? There's always something I think more important to do than just sit in front of the boob tube. So
yeah. I agree. You're sitting in front of one
I'm
right now. But
it's never on.
This probably hasn't been on for 6 months. I don't even know how to turn it on, to be honest. Right. But and you did some very meaningful things in terms of spending time with your father.
I did.
And I don't know if you want to go into that now.
Sure.
Yeah.
The listener may have been confused as to why we're talking about hiking. And,
That's right.
They're like, okay.
We're talking about other. Right.
But so the tie-in for the hiking and why we brought that up is because Scott and I enjoy hiking, both together and by ourselves. And when I heard of your story, I was shocked and amazed. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what I'm talking about? Oh,
sure, of course. So in 2017, I took a lengthy trip with my dad to Europe. And while we were there, I explained to him the Camino De Santiago. And the Camino De Santiago is a 500-mile pilgrimage across northern Spain. And
500 miles.
Okay. How many times is that around the Rose Bowl?
Right, 170.
There you go. Try that. Exactly.
Actually, 166, if you want me to be precise. Okay.
So for any of the viewers who want to go and try out the Camino de Santiago, you know how many times you have to go around.
Right.
But my dad kind of quickly blew me off. He's like, oh, no. He's like, I'm too old for that. Don't talk to me about those things. And I said, okay. So we came home, and about we had been home maybe about 3 days. And my dad said, hey, you know that Camino you were talking about? And I said, yeah. He's like, well, I talked to somebody about it, and I want to do it next summer. And I thought, I did the math, and I'm like, we have 9 months. And usually to prepare for something like that, you need a year.
Really?
And all these things, and all these things started going through my mind. I'm like, how am I going to prepare for the Camino in 9 months? So I got to work. So I spent the next 9 months researching and making reservations and getting equipment and everything that I could to pull it together, and we did it.
What is what kind of topography? What kind of land? What kind of civilization is it during this 500-mile?
You name it, it's there. So
you got big cities, small cities.
You have big cities. You have small cities. On the first day out, you have to climb over the Pyrenees. That's your first day.
Okay.
Wow.
So if you're not shocked after the first day,
So what is it like climbing over the Pyrenees? How high did you have to go? How
Oh,
long
that's a
did
good
it
question.
take?
It took about 37 kilometers to get across the Pyrenees. And
20 miles.
or so,
Yeah.
more or less. Yeah, to get over.
You did that in one day.
It was one day.
One day, okay.
One day, yeah. Walking very slow. So, and it's not that bad. It's not that inclined, but there are people that break it up into 2 days. So you can stay up at the top of the hill and there's a small hotel, or you can keep going and do the entire thing.
So you're essentially backpacking. You have all your sleeping gear and all that equipment on your person.
And not your sleeping gear, because you're not allowed to sleep on the Camino. You have to actually sleep in albergues or hotel or pensions along the Camino.
Okay.
But you do have to carry your gear if you want. My dad wanted to do it old school, and he wanted to carry the gear. So then I said, okay, fine, I'll carry my gear too. I was carrying about 15 pounds. My dad was carrying about 20. 15 pounds doesn't sound like a lot. It's a lot when you're climbing over the Pyrenees. So it can get very uncomfortable very soon. You never get used to it. I just never got used to it, to tell you the truth. It was always heavy to me.
And I don't think you mentioned your father's age at this time.
Oh, my dad was 73 years old at the time.
73.
73 years old. But my dad's a walker. My dad walks 8 miles on the weekends. I don't. So, I think, I was very concerned about my dad. My dad had just come out of surgery. I think he had only been out of surgery for a few months when we started to do the walk. So that's why I actually made reservations at pensions and small hotels, because I was concerned about his health. And so I wanted to make sure that he was okay. But my dad has always been a walker. Even when he lived in Guatemala, he walked very, very long distances. Grew up around the time when there weren't many cars in the area or many buses or transportation, so he walked a lot. And so the one that ended up having more trouble along the Camino was me. So I ended up with all the blisters, all the cramps, the horrible allergies that nobody ever tells you about on the Camino. I just had horrible allergies. We just happened to go on a very, very rainy season, and everything that could have possibly bloomed was blooming. I mean, it was a very, very colorful Camino, more so than you would see in regular pictures of the Camino. Mm-hmm.
So was this in spring? You guys went in spring?
We went in spring. We left in late May. So we left on the 30th of May, and we started walking on the 3rd of June. And we walked for 32 days. Typically it's 33 days, but we condensed the last 2 days so that we could arrive at Finisterre. Finisterre is the end of the world, what was once thought to be the end of the world. And it's the coast. It's the furthest most coast of Spain. And so we took a bus there. We didn't walk it. So we arrived in Santiago and then walked that area.
So who considered it to be the end of the world? When was that? Was that Middle Ages or?
Oh, I'm guessing, yeah, that was probably around the time.
That there was no farther that a person could go.
Exactly. And what's amazing about it, you go there, it looks like the end of the world. I mean, you look at it more so than if you're like, I think if you go to like Malibu and you look out, you know, that for some reason, the way that it's maybe laid out, I guess the horizon, it looks like the end of the world. There's like nothing on that side. Yeah.
So have you done the math already, Scott? 500 miles in 30 days?
Yes. It's like, again, it's about 17 miles a day. Yeah. So what was your favorite memory from the trip?
There's a place called the Cruz de Ferro, and it's somewhere along the middle of the Camino. And I purposely did not want to know exactly where it was. I kind of wanted it to be a surprise. And you bring with you a burden stone. So you bring with you a stone that's kind of means something to you, your burden that you carry with you from the beginning of your trip to this place. And when you get to the Cruz de Ferro, you leave your stone. And so I purposely did not want to know exactly where it was. So, my dad and I were walking and along, and all of a sudden we got to the Cruz de Ferro, and it's a very, very small cross, but it's on a very tall pole. And a lot of the people that we had been walking with along the Camino for all of these days, we just happened to come across it at the exact same time. And we were just shocked that we had finally all gotten there. And nobody was saying a word. Everybody was really quiet. And Chris, one of the gentlemen that we were walking with, says, he's like, oh no, I put my burden stone on the wrong cross. And everybody just starts laughing and crying at the same time. And everybody starts hugging because we had made it finally to this, at least this destination, which was the highest point in the Camino. And so we were just so elated that we had reached there. And we were just crying and just so happy that we had made it. Yeah.
Well, it must have been such a bonding experience for you and your father to go on this trip together.
Oh, it really was. It really was. Yeah. Yeah. Spending that much time. I was very blessed to spend that much time with my dad because, who gets to spend that much time with their parents, in their 40s? I mean, that just doesn't happen, right? So I was very blessed to be able to spend that time with my dad. It's definitely a good memory.
Well, and there's something else that came from this trip that I want to get into. But before we get into that, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
The legal process can be intimidating. You don't know where to start and you're unsure of what to expect. The attorneys and staff at the law offices of Scott Warmoth have been serving the San Gabriel Valley for over 35 years, helping people just like you navigate through the legal process and ensuring you're treated fairly. You can find them at law888.com or call 626-282-6868. That's 626-282-6868.
All right, we're back with Susana. Susana, you shared with us something special that came from this trip. What was that?
Well, I like to travel with purpose, and one of the goals that I had set for myself was to write a journal every day. And I wanted to serve two purposes. One, I wanted to document my trip with my dad, and I wanted to use it also to communicate with my friends back home because I knew I wasn't going to see them for 5 weeks. So I created a blog, and about 2 weeks before the trip, I decided to document my trip through poetry. And because if you can look at thousands of Camino blogs and they all look the same. And so I knew that I was basically going to say the same thing, but I wanted mine to sound differently. So I came upon the Shakespearean sonnet, and initially it was kind of like a fun thing. I thought, I'll make it fun, and my friends will get a kick out of it. I'll send them one picture and one poem, and it'll be great. But then it became a little bit more serious. It kind of turned into like a little bit of a job. At first it was fine. I wrote at home. My first one I wrote from home. I wrote on the bus. in the Uber, whatever it was. I wrote on the plane at the airport. So I was in comfortable areas where I could write. Well, it got pretty serious when I was walking 6, 7, 8 hours a day, and I didn't have the luxury of sitting down somewhere at a cafe where I was going to be writing like Ernest Hemingway. So I ended up having like a little tiny notebook in one pocket and a little tiny pen in the other. And every time a thought came to my head, I would take everything on and just jot it down. If I realized soon that if I didn't have at least 6 lines written by lunch, that I was probably going to be up pretty late and that night. But as a result, I ended up with 39 sonnets. And a few of my friends had mentioned, they said, hey, you should really turn this into a book. And I didn't take it really seriously until COVID hit. Another friend of mine said, you should really turn it into a book and give it to your friends for Christmas. And I thought, wow, what a great idea, And so, and it'll be great, cheap to mail, and and it'll be very convenient and a personal gift to all my friends. Well, being the type A personality that I am, it wasn't that simple. I made a table of contents for it, an introduction, a conclusion, footnotes, an appendix. Next thing you know, I had an index, and it really started looking like a real book. And then a couple of my friends said, you should really look for a publisher. And I thought, this is really getting out of hand. And so, but I thought, you know what? To appease my friends, I'm going to send it to 5 publishers. And if I get turned down, fine, I'll just self-publish the thing and give it to my friends as gifts. So I found a publisher that I liked. I sent it off to the first publisher, and they accepted it. So I'm publishing my first book, my first unintended book.
Wow,
So,
congratulations.
Thank you.
When will it come out?
I haven't been told the official date yet, but the final documents have been turned in. I did the index was the final thing, and I'm waiting for them to do the design for the cover. And I think that'll be about it.
Do you have a name?
Yes, it's To Compostela and Beyond. And actually, a friend of mine came up with that. I must have spent days trying to think of a title.
Well, that's a really meaningful title, though.
Oh, thank you. Does it remind you of anything? To Compostela and Beyond?
Well, yeah. But vaguely, I'm not sure.
It actually reminds me of Buzz Lightyear.
Exactly.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So a friend of mine walks in one day into my job, and I said, Tina, I can't think of a title. Can you please just think of a title for this thing? 'Cause this is just driving me crazy. And she thought about it for literally like a second, and she's like, To Compostela and Beyond. And I thought, that sounds pretty cool. And I said, where did you come up with that? She's like, Buzz Lightyear.
It's from Toy Story, Pixar animated film. He says to infinity and beyond.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I just thought that was so
But
quirky.
I think
cute.
it's a nice name, though.
Yeah.
I mean, a nice title, because it sort of makes you think of something more than just your geographical destination, right?
Exactly. And it's not, and what you learn on the Camino, it's that it's not the destination, but it's your personal Camino. It's not just
Right, yeah.
It's not just your journey on the Camino, but it's your life journey,
Yeah.
right?
And what does Compostela mean?
It's the way to the stars.
The way to the stars. Mm-hmm. Okay, Stella.
So that makes sense, right? To infinity and beyond, kind of.
Sure. Yeah. It does.
Yeah.
And
So, yeah.
you wanted to keep this as a surprise, right, for your father?
It is a surprise. Actually, my dad would see me write on the Camino, and I kind of showed him what I was doing, but he's, didn't, really pay too much attention to it. And so I have not told him that I'm getting published. So my plan is to take him to the bookstore and have him buy it.
So you may need to edit that out.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a large portion of the show. I'm not sure if we could do that. But you mentioned that you grew up here.
Mm-hmm.
You went to school here, so you have a lot of memories here.
I do.
And we want to go into what are some of your favorite places or things to do in the San Gabriel Valley.
So Susana has, as a native Pasadenan, or what is a Pasadena resident called?
I think it's Pasadena, isn't it?
Is that
Pasadena,
right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. You would have your favorite places, experiences, and so on in this area, and we call that SGV3 on this show.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of your favorite things to talk about, to describe experiences you've had or places?
Oh, and I do
done?
have 3. I have one for
Yeah.
East Pasadena, one for West Pasadena, and one for all over Pasadena. Actually.
Okay, good.
And one of them you kind of touched upon earlier. One of my favorite places to hike in is the Lower Arroyo, which is just down the street.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really pretty down there. It's almost very secluded. And it's very diverse. There's an archery range. There's the casting ponds. There are hiking trails, obviously. You see horses when you're walking down there. And you can kind of tailor your walk any which way that you want every time that you go, because there's different little trails along the way.
Right.
So that's West Pasadena. One place that I really love in East Pasadena is the Whistle Stop, which is the store that sells little model trains.
Yeah. It's right there on Altadena and Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay, right, yeah. I have seen that,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And well, my dad took me there when I was a little kid, and I don't think that Pasadena, it's such a unique thing. It's just such a unique thing, period. And then for Pasadena to have it, I think that's great.
Is it a store that actually sells model
Mm-hmm.
trains? And do they have a lot of model train setups that you...
They do.
can
Well,
look at?
they have a lot of things that you can look at.
Yeah.
And one really cool thing about it is it's one of the official things, I think, on the Route 66. So there's a really neat neon sign that's on the exterior of it. And it's actually considered a California cultural landmark. So, so it's, you might not see it right off the bat, but it's a cute little thing to look at.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the Whistle Stop on Colorado Boulevard in East Pasadena, Colorado, and Altadena.
More or less, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And my third favorite is the rotating art here in Pasadena. Every single district has one piece of rotating art. So every couple of years they change it up a little bit, and they bring in a new artist and a new piece of art to that specific place. So for my district, for example, it's located on the corner of Sunset and Mountain, and the art changes there every couple of years. So you can find out where the art is in every district, and it's COVID friendly, right? They're outside, and you can walk to them. Some of them, it's probably better to stay across the street because some of them are in medians. But I think that's a very neat thing that we have here in Pasadena.
I hadn't heard of that before. So there would be, what, 5?
No, 7. We have 7 installations, in addition to public art that's around the city.
Ah. Mm-hmm. So would you generally have an artist from that particular district?
No, I think they come from all over.
Oh, do they?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah. So I'm sure you've seen the art. You probably
didn't know what it was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah. So
That's interesting.
So have you seen them?
I have not. No, where did you mention they are?
Well, mine is on the corner of Sunset and Mountain. And so, there's one there right now. But every district has a specific place. So,
do you know where some of the others would be?
There's one on Foothill. There's like an angel on Foothill, going east on Foothill, and it's kind of like on a little medium. I think near the street is Daisy, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one out there. It's an angel, and it's right in the middle of the street, and where the street splits a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And yeah.
Foothill and Daisy, there's a large new development going on there, right? Where the Avon building was?
Oh, yeah, that's on the other side. Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah.
Foothill and Daisy.
Yeah. Do you know where Foothill and, because Foothill and Walnut are kind of the same. Yeah, so it's
near the In-N-Out.
Yeah, there you go. Going towards, past the In-N-Out, that's where you would find it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be on the lookout there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Actually, now I want to see where all 7 are and find out where the locations are. That's really interesting.
And if they haven't changed it, I believe that you can go on the website and find information on each artist. And I think there's like a little podcast on each one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, your book is not going to be out for a while, but we'll certainly put the link in there when it does come out.
Thank you.
Share again the title for the listener.
It's To Compostela and Beyond, a poet's chronicle of the Camino de Santiago.
Oh, beautiful. And that will be available for purchase where?
Oh, I'm hoping to have it at Romans.
Romans, okay.
Romans and Amazon.
Excellent.
Yes.
Well, Susana, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show. And
my pleasure.
Sharing this story with us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
both.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the SGV Master Key. You can find the full back catalog of the SGV Master Key at sgvmasterkey.com and wherever you get your podcasts. This show was produced and edited by Russell Mono and Victoria Allers of Kind Monster Productions. Thanks again for listening or watching. We'll see you again real soon in the next episode.
Nice mother. No, kind mother.